You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Have you ever dreamt of being part of a royal family? I mean, it sounds fun, right? Well, sadly, it's not all tiaras and tea parties. Sometimes that royal life comes at a huge expense, like your privacy, your freedom, and in some cases, even your life. Hey, this is Katie from Queen's Podcast, and today I want to tell you about one of my favorite podcasts, Even the Royals. Over on Even the Royals, they are spilling the tea on the messy royals you know and love, like the wives of Henry VIII. They're so much more than the rhyme, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived, you know? They are also going to tell you about some royals that you might not know, like Esther of Burundi. She was a princess who had to flee her home during a revolution and went on to become France's first black supermodel. How cool is that? We think y'all are really gonna love Even the Royals. So follow Even the Royals on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can binge Even the Royals ad-free right now on Wondery Plus.
Hola a todos. This is Angelica Cordero from The Persistence. Katie and Nathan wanted me to let y'all know that they use colorful language and discuss mature topics on this show. So if that's not your thing, it's cool if you want to turn it off now. But if you're curious about the unsung heroines of history, those who defied the odds and made waves in politics, arts, and activism, then check out The Persistence. We celebrate the fierce women who've shaped our world in ways you've never learned in school. And now, on to Queens. Salud!
Hi, this is Katie.
And this is Nathan.
And you're listening to Queen's Podcast, the show about women in history.
No business like show.
Like no business. Hello, Nathan.
Hello, Katie.
Oh my gosh. Nathan and I had a conversation yesterday that made me realize we really are approaching middle age because I said, Nathan, I got a new vacuum cleaner. And he was like, oh my God, tell me all about it.
It's so true. We get so excited about being domesticated.
Yes.
It's the little things in life, right?
It really is. Yeah. So we are back to finish the story of Margaret of Anjou. This has been such an interesting research process. And gosh, I just think she's a fucking badass.
Yeah.
Regardless of what happens. Spoiler alert.
Don't Google it.
But before we get into it, Nathan, let's do some Patreon shout-outs. Yes, shout out to our awesome Patreon supporters, Brianna, Hannah, Lauren, and Madison.
Also, shout outs to Christina, Michael John, Megan, and Reese.
Yes. So thank you so much to all of our Patreon supporters at every level. But you know what? Also, thank you to everybody that's tuning in at all. You know, when we first started this podcast, it was like, hey, maybe we'll make 5 friends that'll nerd out with us. And now there's hundreds of you, thousands of you.
Yeah, I know. It's great. We can all be nerds together and love on each other.
We do not gatekeep nerdiness, but if you would like some extra nerdiness, no pressure, come and see us over on Patreon. That being said, Nathan, where did we leave off with Margaret of Anjou's story?
So a lot has happened. So make sure that you're listening to part 1 and part 2. But here's a huge, sweeping summary. Margaret has been Queen of England for 16 years and has one son, Edward. Since there's another Edward in this story, we're just going to stick to calling him the Prince of Wales to make it a little less confusing.
Yeah, Prince Edward. And because, it can get confusing because they only had like 5 names. So Margaret's mentally unstable husband, Henry VI, King of England, has had a disastrous reign. And despite his best efforts, the country is officially now in civil war, which is so messed up because in episode 1, the entire theme was Margaret is here to bring peace. And now it's more fucking
Yes, right
War.
after they've
You know
gotten
what?
done with the 100 Years' War, it's like, and
Yes.
we're right back into
And then
America.
straight into Civil War. Yeah. War.
Oh,
Huh.
good God,
Good
yeah.
God, yo. So they are at Civil War, and Margaret secured an army from her allies in Scotland to try to win her husband's reign back. Though they win several decisive battles, it comes back to bite them in the ass because the army that she has been running has been like pillaging villages all throughout England. And funny how people don't like that.
Imagine that. We don't like it whenever you pillage our village. Ha.
But
And
no, there was murder. It wasn't good.
yeah, right. And when we last left her, Margaret was standing at the gates of London being refused entry. They're like, nope.
They're like, pretend we're not home. Close the blinds. Turn off the
Nobody's
lights.
home. They're like, we're gonna actually crown this other guy king.
Yeah.
So this new king is Edward, the eldest surviving son of the Duke of York, who was Margaret's sworn enemy.
Yeah. Edward is now Edward the Fourth, which is what we're going to call him, not to be confused with Prince Edward or the Prince of Wales. And we've talked about Edward the Fourth a lot in this show. We are a
Yes.
little bit of Edward the Fourth of fangirls over here. But if you want to learn more about him, definitely check out our Elizabeth Woodville episode. But anyway, so he's officially king now, and he's a pretty popular king. He's a pretty good king. On paper, he is everything that Margaret's husband is not. He's a warrior. He's strong. He's charismatic. He's good with the ladies. He's good with politics. He actually wants to be king. Everything, like he's everything a medieval king was supposed to be, which probably felt like a bit of a gut punch to Margaret, you know?
And Maggie is no dummy, and she knows that if they stay in London, they're getting captured. So Margaret grabs Henry and their son Edward and hightail it all the way back to Scotland, which some people think that this was a sign of cowardice, but what good could she do if she's captured and murdered?
Yeah. Yeah. It's about survival, really, because history
Right?
is horrifying. So Scotland is like, look, we're out of resources for you. We got no more to give you. We gave you an army. You let them act a fool. You can stay here for a little bit, like while you figure out your next steps, but we got nothing else for you.
Yeah, she looks around and is like, guess that's fine.
Fine.
So she writes a letter to her uncle, the King of France, Charles VII, and she's like, "Oh, he loves me. He's gonna write me back. It's gonna be great."
Yeah.
But too bad because he's dead.
Uh-oh.
And now her cousin Louis XI was king, and Louis XI is like, new phone who dis. I don't know her.
New phone who dis indeed. I don't owe you shit. Louis XI was kind of a dickhead, but cousin Louis had absolutely no interest in helping Margaret. But she is kind of out of options. So she's like, okay, I'm obviously not going to get anywhere over letter. I'm going to go to France and talk to him face to face and convince him that this is in his best interest to help me get my husband's throne back. So she takes her son, so her and the Prince Edward, they go to France.
Yeah, she gets over to France, and I guess she just more or less is convincing in person, not via letter.
Yeah.
She's so much better in person. She makes some deals. She promises some land, and then her cousin is like, okay, sure. So long as when you get your husband's crown back, you actually give us men for our army, because we've got this beef with Burgundy. Surprise, surprise.
So, yeah, everybody's fighting. So Maggie's like, that's perfect. I can definitely do that. So she heads back to England with her kid and her army, and she is pumped. You know, she's pumped. She's like, this is a new start. We are taking this shit back. Let's go. And it seems like this newfound energy was contagious because people start following her again and they start fighting for the Lancastrians again. But if only that goodwill actually meant anything, because the Lancastrian armies could not catch a fucking break.
Oh no, that's an understatement. It sucks because I feel Maggie has learned a lot about war in the last few years. Like something she wouldn't have gotten an education on growing up, but Edward truly at this point in terms of battles, he is just being unbeatable.
Yeah, my friend Melissa has a podcast called God's Favorite, and she talks about like people in history that it just seemed like she talks about a lot about like Napoleon Bonaparte, like how in the beginning of career it just seemed like he was God's favorite for some reason. And I feel like that's what I think about when I think about Edward IV in this time in history. Like he was unbeatable. It just seemed like God was like, yeah, no, this guy fucks. I fuck with him, he fucks with me. So for instance, there's this battle called the Battle of Towton. It's considered still to this day, Nathan, the bloodiest battle on English soil. 28,000 people died at one battle, and most of them were Lancastrians.
Oh my god.
28,000 people. So that is like 2 times the population of our hometown. Which isn't saying too much.
But that is a lot. Oh. That is a lot of people. Like that literally is a population of a small town.
Yes. And unsurprisingly, after this battle, the Lancastrian soldiers start to kind of reconsider. They're like, look, we love you, Maggie, but I don't know.
Yeah, and to add insult to injury, the Yorkists start a smear campaign on Maggie. I hate this part. They're literally like, why does this old queen want to lead an army anyway? This is just unnatural for women to want to fight. It just completely goes against nature. The mere fact that she's out there raising troops without her husband in that time frame is really weird. And that reputation, unfortunately, has stuck with Margaret even to this day. Yeah. Some people still have that belief of her.
She's just historically viewed as like this masculine figure, and not that there's anything wrong. We all have a masculine side of us, you know. Well, we'll talk about the double standards later. She retreats back to Scotland, where she thinks she still has friends. But with Edward and his BFF, the Earl of Warwick, aka Wardick, like their army is getting closer and closer to the northern border. The Queen in Scotland is like, I think the English royal family has outstayed their welcome, actually. I'm not really trying to fight against this guy that doesn't lose.
Right.
So Maggie and her son, Prince Edward, they hightail it back to France, while Henry stays in England, more or less in disguise and kind of just like couch surfing with noble families that were still secretly siding with the Lancastrian side.
It is noteworthy that she leaves Henry in England. Now, I don't know if that's a choice that I would have made.
Why wouldn't she have brought him back with her? Let's discuss that. Like,
I don't understand it either. Maybe she's thinking there's going to be some random uprising and they're just going to need him as a figurehead to sweep him in there all of a sudden.
Maybe she's thinking if we're split up, if one of us gets captured, the other one is still at large to...
Yeah, I laugh, but it's like Henry VI was captured how many times?
Also, what the fuck is Henry going to do on his own anyway? Yeah, and he's already been captured twice. He's an easy to capture king. Spoiler alert. Yeah, I think if it was me, I probably would have brought Henry with me. I wish we knew more about that. But hey, if you're listening to this on Spotify, you can now actually comment on episodes. Go ahead and comment and let us know why you think maybe she would have left him behind in England.
Now I'm also wondering of like, would that make it look like they're buddy with France now and they're on the same side as France, and so that's not a good look for an English king to be,
or for an English king to just leaving,
harbored by a French king. Like maybe there's some optics that look weird. Anyway, please leave a comment.
Let us know what your theories are. We don't know.
What we do know is that it looked bad. The optics
Yeah.
back in England are that this evil queen is causing her husband's downfall, and now she's abandoning him and going home. And obviously, the Yorks were doing nothing to stop this rumor
Yeah.
because the optics aren't great and they're using it to their advantage.
She gets over to France, but Edward the Fourth, he's already made deals with basically all of her friends over in France. King Louis is like, actually, I don't want to fight with England anymore. And so then she goes to the Dukes of Burgundy, Brittany, and Flanders, and they're like, sorry, Maggie, that king is very charismatic and charming. So, and also, we don't want to fight with England anymore either. So, sorry.
She also gets a letter from the Queen Mother in Scotland. So we talked about her in our last episode, Mary of Gelders. And she's like, hey, Mary of Gelders is like, super sorry. But it's not you, it's me.
It's also you.
It's also you because you're a little controversial. So I'm going to break up with
Yeah.
you. And in the last episode, we had talked about how there was this marriage alliance between Prince Edward, so Maggie's son, and one of the Scottish princesses. Yeah, that's not happening.
That's not happening anymore. Sorry about it.
Yeah, they're literally just like, okay, this is a battle that we're not going to win.
Exactly.
So we're going to step out.
Sorry. So Margaret is, I mean, she's shit out of luck. I don't know any other way to say it. And obviously she can't go back to England because the Yorks are going to be patrolling the docks, so, and as soon as she lands, they're going to take her and her son, so we are now entering Margaret of Anjou's exile era.
Oh, this sounds not
fun.
fun.
An era that would go on for about 7 years.
Ooh, okay. Before we do that, let's go top off our drinks and I'll meet you back here.
Okay, sounds good.
This is an ad for BetterHelp. Welcome to the world. Please read your personal owner's manual thoroughly. In it, you'll find simple instructions for how to interact with your fellow human beings and how to find happiness and peace of mind. Thank you, and have a nice life.
Unfortunately, life doesn't come with an owner's manual. That's why there's BetterHelp Online Therapy. Connect with a credentialed therapist by phone, video, or online chat. Visit BetterHelp.com to learn more. That's BetterHelp.com.
Max Bankman, I'm the new doctor.
Welcome aboard the Odyssey.
ABC Thursdays.
This ship is heaven. We're tending to our passengers' dreams.
I'm in.
From 911 executive producer Ryan Murphy comes a splashy new drama on a luxury cruise ship with Joshua Jackson and Don Johnson.
It's your job to keep everyone alive.
She's in VFib. 1, 2, 3. Clear.
I have a pulse.
You're going to be okay.
Dr. Odyssey. Thursdays, 9/8 Central on ABC. And stream on Hulu.
We are back. So Nathan, if you were in exile, what would you do? Like, what would you do to pass the time? If you're in exile, you can't talk to your friends and you don't have the internet. If you were in exile from Austin, you couldn't be here, where would you go and what would you do?
The bathhouses.
That's definitely one way to pass the time.
What would you do?
Nothing. I would just be like, you know what? I need a nap. That's fine.
A 7-year nap.
Read. Yeah. Well, Margaret and Edward move into her dad is still the Duke of Anjou. And so he's got some properties and because he's still alive. Her mom has passed away, but her dad's still alive. And her dad gives her a small palace, one of the smaller palaces to live in.
A little chateau.
She has some other guys that were hardcore ride or die Lancastrians that are also in exile. So she and her son and a handful of the Lancastrians move into this palace and kind of laid low for a while.
Yeah, and Margaret's son, Prince Edward, is about 11 now, and he spent every waking moment learning how to fight. Which
you are not going to be a weak king.
Yeah, she's basically being like, you're not going to be like your father. Which we have to assume is because Maggie saw what happened to his father and was like, oh, no, we got to change that.
She's like, it's unnatural for me to fight because I'm a woman. Okay, fine. I'm going to make sure my son can fight anybody anywhere.
Yes.
Edward's grandfather and great-grandfather, so Henry's the fourth and fifth of England, had both been famous warrior kings. So she's like, I know what's in your DNA. We are going to find it in there. You're not going to be like your dad. You are going to be like these other men from your family, and you're going to get the Lancastrian crown back. So pick up that sword, chop, chop. This is the part of the story where there's like a training montage of him learning to be a knight.
Be a man.
Yes.
Like, literally.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Katie, guess what happens?
What happens?
Henry VI gets captured.
Oh my gosh, I would have never seen that coming.
Once again, Maggie's like, oh my God, damn it.
God damn it. Why didn't she bring him with?
Yeah, what did she expect? Like, seriously, you're the losing side of a battle, and turning him over would be such an easy way for someone to get the king's favor at this point.
Yeah.
So he is now imprisoned in the Tower of London.
It's a nice prison. Like, it's, it's not a dungeon. He's got his books. He's got a nice bed. He is free to just disassociate all day long. Honestly, this sounds ideal for Henry VI.
Yeah, it does. Like, this honestly is something that he probably would do him a little good.
He's probably like, oh, just some books and praying and staring off into the distance. Sign me the fuck up.
But besides that, not much else happens in those 5 years. So let's switch gears a little bit and hop on over to England.
Oh, so we got this bachelor king, don't we? Edward the Fourth.
6 foot fun.
6 foot fun, and he is single and ready to make a powerful alliance. Do you remember his hype man, the Earl of Warwick? The Earl of Warwick is deep into marriage negotiations for Edward. England's been at war off and on for like the last 120 years or something. And they haven't had a queen that's brought in money in a long time. So like, we're going to make a powerful marriage alliance. We're going to get that dowry. We're going to get a payday. So if he's going to marry a French princess, they're going to get this good dowry. Warwick is deep in planning this.
Yeah, they're broke.
Yes.
Let's be real. They're broke, so they need the money.
Yes.
But, Elizabeth Woodville has entered the chat.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Smoke show.
Yes.
TLDR. Edward falls in love with a commoner.
Her mother was a duchess, but whatever.
But she's considered a commoner. And her name is Elizabeth Woodville. And they got married in secret. And this pisses off Warwick.
Oh my gosh.
He's humiliated because he's been sitting here hustling to make this marriage alliance, but Edward, this whole time, knew that it was going to come to nothing.
I already married somebody. Sorry about it.
Daisy. I just fell on her.
Oops. We have a whole episode on Elizabeth Woodville, so definitely check out that for the rest of the drama. But what you need to know is this was just the last straw for Warwick. He's been calling himself the kingmaker, but now that Edward is actually in power, he's not getting the kickback he thought he was going to get. And so when Edward marries Elizabeth Woodville, and then Elizabeth Woodville's family starts getting all the power that Warwick thinks he should have, it's just like, he's had a fucking enough. Fuck that.
Bullshit. Yeah.
Fuck that. So he finds himself in France, looking for revenge, and he's got his youngest daughter, a girl named Anne Neville, with her. Which, yes, you big nerds, we are gonna cover Anne Neville one day. Don't worry.
Right. So he goes to the King of France and is like, okay, here's my plan. I'm gonna marry my daughter to Margaret of Anjou's son.
Right.
Why? Because I'm a badass on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And after their marriage, I will take back the English throne for the Lancastrians, and if you back us financially, we'll give you some lands and sign a peace truce and blah, 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 blah.
Yes. King Louis was actually pretty into this idea. He was like, I'm in. I love the chaos, but you need to convince Margaret of Anjou. And good fucking luck, my man.
Yeah, and remember, Maggie hates this man.
Hates this man.
Literally, he worked his entire life to basically ruin her reputation. Rumor mills about her cheating on her husband and that her son was a bastard and that she's quote unquote unnatural for being a woman and fighting for what's rightfully hers. So when she got word of his plan, she was like, "You're fucking joking, right? Like, the Earl of Warwick is here asking me to marry my only child to his daughter? Fuck that."
She's like, "Hey, weren't you just telling everybody that my son was a bastard or a quote unquote changeling? But now that it's convenient to you, you want to marry your daughter to that bastard."
You know that Leonardo DiCaprio meme where he's like, like he's like, that's what I'm imagining her.
She's like, "So you never truly thought he was a bastard, or you actually don't care. So you're a fucking hypocrite either way. Fuck you. Fuck your peace offering. Kiss my ass. Maggie out," you know?
And Warwick came to her himself and he groveled like, "OMG, I was so wrong. I was blinded by power and it went against my king and country. Let me make this right. Let's make England great again. Lega."
Okay, real talk. Margaret didn't have a whole lot of other options.
No.
And she's staying here at the pleasure of the King of France. And if he's telling her, "I want you to make this alliance," she was going to have to. But I like that she didn't make it easy for him anyway. No. Even though that she didn't have a whole lot of other options, she was like, "Oh no, we are going to make this interesting."
Right. All of her most powerful generals are either dead or in exile with her, and her husband's a prisoner now. So on paper, she's not the one that should be making any demands with anybody. But in case you're new here and you didn't know anything about Maggie, she did it anyway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. After weeks of her stalling negotiations, she's finally like, if Warwick wants this so badly, he can come to me and personally grovel. So he, in front of because the Earl of Warwick came over with his whole posse as well. So he's got 15, 20 guys. And then Margaret's got her 15, 20 guys. And Warwick also has his wife and daughter there. And so Margaret's dad was probably there too. She makes the Earl of Warwick get on his knees, literally get on his knees and beg for forgiveness for a full 15 minutes. I am in love with her at this moment. That is the pettiness that I strive for in everything in my life.
I can just see her 5 minutes in being like, do you hear something? Do y'all hear something? I don't. Maybe it needs to be a little louder.
It's it sounds like there's somebody really desperate in here, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Do y'all smell desperation? I smell desperation. It's like, Maggie, you don't really have a whole lot of other options anyway, but I love it.
Prince Edward and Anne Neville are then married in France when the prince was 17 and Anne was 14. And then Warwick was like, "Okay, I'm going to take my son-in-law, go back to England and raise an army." And then Margaret's like, "The hell you are."
That wasn't the plan. Earl of Warwick is like, "I need the prince to raise troops. I need him to be a figurehead since his dad is kind of useless and he actually knows how to hold a sword." And Margaret was like, "No, you said you'd raise an army and defeat Edward IV. You didn't say anything about my son being there with you while you do it. He is staying here. You're going to England. You're getting my husband's ass back in that throne. And then my son and I will come over when you can guarantee our safety." So,
and that's what they did.
Yeah.
And right now we're going to do a little bit of skimming. I think we go over this in way more detail in both the Elizabeth Woodville and the Elizabeth of York episodes.
Yeah.
So Edward IV was outnumbered and taken by surprise, so he ends up fleeing. Warwick marched on up into the Tower of London and frees Henry VI and was like, guess what, baby? You're king again.
Yeah. Bow, bow, bow. To which Henry was like, oh, why? Oh. Oh, no, thank you. I mean, he just really wasn't living in this plane of existence. He's never had a firm grasp on reality since he had his big mental break. But regardless of what Henry actually wanted, Warwick is like, get up, put your king shit on. And he marched him through the streets of London holding his hand. Like, because I guess I'm not sure Henry's going to know which way to go. So he marched him through the streets of London holding the king's hand and put his ass back on that throne, just like he promised Margaret he would.
And now, with the help of her new bestie, she is now officially the Queen of England again.
Again.
And they lived happily ever after.
Bye!
Don't Google it.
Edward IV, he got the fuck out and he's hanging out in Flanders. And on October 13th, 1470, Henry VI is formally crowned King of England again, much to his dismay.
But don't worry, Henry wasn't actually given any power. Warwick was running the show at this point. He sends Margaret a letter like, okay, coast is clear, time to come back to England, and me and you are going to run this show together.
Yes, I am the kingmaker. Come back, you and me, we're going to share this power, girl. But it's ye old times. And that's really frustrating because if you send a letter in October from London to Anjou, it's probably not going to get there until November. And November is winter, and traveling in winter is way more dangerous. So Margaret and Prince Edward and their army don't head to England until April.
Ooh.
I know.
And that means that Edward IV had all this time to run around Europe and charm the pants off everybody because he's super hot and charismatic.
Yeah.
And he ends up raising another army of his own. And he's also ready to leave England around April.
Yeah, like they may have been in their ships heading to England at the same time. I know. We don't know much. We don't really know how much Margaret knew what Edward IV was up to. Like, she almost certainly had spies because, of course, she would have had spies trying to keep tabs on him. But like we just said, information travels so slow. So she may have just known, oh, yeah, he's heading that way. But by the time she gets that information, maybe his troops have doubled. You know, like there's no... That just, I think that, I was going to say that would probably be my least thing about living in history, about like how slow it would be to get any information. But no, it would definitely be the plague would be my least favorite thing about living in history. Never mind.
Anyway, they land in England on April 14th of 1471. So she gets off the boat and she learns that Edward IV and Warwick fought in battle that very same morning. And wish we had better news, but Warwick has fought his last war.
He died the same day she landed in England. Like, what if her and her army would have just landed like 3 days earlier? You know,
it would have been it could have been a completely different story.
I believe in signs from the universe. And so if this was me and I got off the ship and the very first thing I'm told is your biggest ally is dead, I would have been like, well, don't unload the ship because we are turning the fuck around. But that I am, how you say, a coward. Maggie's got balls of steel. She's got big titty energy. She is like, no, I'm not running. What are my actual odds of winning? Somebody come talk to me. Let's like strategize here.
Strategery.
I don't know if she mourned Warwick. They weren't friends for very long. I don't think she actually liked him as a person. So
yeah, she just liked him because he liked her.
Yeah.
The Lancastrian generals at this point were like, actually, a lot of people are looking sideways at Edward IV right now.
Yeah.
So if we want a chance and a shot, it's now or never. You need to send your army to Wales, get some troops from Jasper Tudor, but you should go now because Edward's army is probably already marching this way to take you hostage.
Fuck! History is horrifying. Ugh. And that is just so much information. Like, she just got off the boat.
Right?
That is so much information to process. Like, you're on your trip being like, I'm going to land and be Queen of England and there's going to be parades. And no, you land, your ally is dead and somebody is coming this way probably to take you hostage. Go! And so she's like, let's fucking go. Let's go. Let's go. And so they start their march across the country with, once again, Margaret of Anjou at the head of the army.
And basically over the next 3 weeks, Edward's army was just chasing Maggie around. I'm imagining like Roadrunner and like chasing each other.
Yeah.
Until the two armies finally met up on May 4th of 1471.
Margaret, her daughter-in-law Anne, and their ladies in waiting, they find a church to like hold up in. We're not really sure what religious house, but they find some kind of church, abbey, nunnery, something like that, to hold up in. And her baby, Prince of Wales, her son Edward, he's going to battle. If I was Margaret, it's so hard because on one hand you want to be like, he's just a baby, but he was 18. That is an adult now. Mm-hmm. This is literally what he's been training for his whole life. But I would just be like, it's so high stakes for your very first battle, but he's a grown ass man. So he goes to battle. How do you think, put yourself in Margaret's shoes right there, watching like your baby get all suited up for battle and being like, oh no.
Yeah. Oh,
I know this is what we've always wanted you to do, but oh no.
Takesies backsies. Can I do
just
that?
A baby.
Please? Yeah. I can imagine her being like, okay, on one hand, yes, he's been training his whole life for this, and that's what we kind of have to do this at some point.
Yeah.
But at the other coin, it's like on the other side of the coin, it's literally,
yeah.
Everything that we're fighting for could be gone if he dies.
And he's going up against Edward, who doesn't really have a lot of losses under his belt,
Should have gone to France when you had the chance.
Should have gone to France when you had the chance and did a dance in France. Yes.
That was highly unnecessary, but here we are.
You know what, Nathan? That could be the tagline of our entire show. Queen's Podcast. That was highly unnecessary, but here we are. But no, she didn't go back to France when she had the chance and do a dance because she is not a coward like I am.
Yeah, the French call it le coward.
Yeah.
So this battle was called the Battle of Tewkesbury, and it effectively ended this part of the Wars of the Roses. So sadly for Margaret, it's a big ol' L. That stands for loss, in case you
Thank you.
There's a big loss for the team Lancaster.
Yeah. But most unfortunately for Margaret, her son was killed. We don't know how she found out, but we do know that after Prince Edward died, all that fight that she had, it was just sort of like at that point, she's just like, well, what's the fucking point now? All that big titty Aries energy just kind of left her after that. She was ready to give up. This is so sad. Let's take a quick break. I'm going to go have a quick cry. And then we can regroup and discuss the rest of the life of Margaret of Anjou.
Was the Sphinx 10,000 years old?
Were there serial killers in ancient Greece and Rome?
What were the lives of transgender, intersex, and non-binary people like in the ancient world?
We're Jen.
And Jenny.
From Ancient History Fangirl. We tell you true stories and tall tales of the ancient world. Sometimes we do it tipsy. Sometimes we have amazing guests on our show. Historians like Barry Strauss, podcasters like Liv Albert, Mike Duncan, and authors like Joanne Harris and Ben Aronovich.
We take you to the top of Hadrian's Wall to watch the Roman Empire fall at the end of the world.
We walk the catacombs beneath the temple of the feathered serpent under Teotihuacan.
We walk the sacred spirals of the Nazca Lines in search of ancient secrets.
And we explore mythology from ancient cultures around the world.
Come find us at ancienthistoryfangirl.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Everybody shush! William Shatner has something to say.
Cat and Jethro, box of oddities.
What do you do when the woman you love dies? Well, of course you dig her up and you live with her.
Aww.
The show examines weird things.
There are plenty of old photographs from this time period of children out in the streets playing in and among the dead horse carcasses.
Oh, I miss those days. Things used to be so much simpler.
Cat and Jethro.
Then there's the urine wheel, which sounds like a really bad game show.
They've done weird things. Cat and Jethro, box of oddities. That is really mysterious.
Join Cat and Jethro Gilligan Toth for the strange, the bizarre, the unexpected, as they lift the lid and cautiously peer inside the Box of Oddities.
The Webby Award-winning Box of Oddities podcast from Airwave Media.
All right, Nathan, I'm not crying.
You're crying.
You are. Allergies. I think we should be honest that the rest of Margaret of Anjou's story is sad.
Yeah.
The rest of this is a stone cold bummer, and there's just not a lot of material to make jokes about. But that being said, the rest of this we are going to talk towards the end. We are going to talk about why we think she was so fucking cool, and maybe even announce a giveaway.
Maybe we'll make the sad part of this story fun.
We'll try our hardest. It's a comedy history podcast.
So Margaret is in hiding in some kind of church or something. We don't know where for sure. She has her daughter-in-law with her, along with a few other ladies in waiting. And after 3 days, Margaret wrote back to Edward IV, telling him where she was, basically being like, "Hey, come get me. I'm not going to put up a fight at this point."
Yeah, she's just so resigned to her fate at this point, which is so sad because she had so much fight, and now that her son's gone, what's the fucking point? Margaret and her daughter-in-law were taken to meet the king, and we don't know for sure, but if I was Margaret, I would probably be thinking, is he going to kill me?
Yeah.
I raised an army against the king, and I lost. That's treason. People don't often get let go for treason. Is this about to be the end of my life?
But luckily, killing women, and especially ones that had once been queen before, wasn't really Edward IV's style. Instead, he sent daughter-in-law Anne to go live with her sister and told Margaret, "Hey, look, I'm not going to hurt you, but you're going to have to be imprisoned at the Tower of London until we can figure out what the fuck to do with you."
Yeah. When Edward IV, so he re-enters London, and it reminded me so much of, do you remember when we talked about in the Cleopatra episode that before she decided to take her own life, it was because when she was captured, she knew they were going to march her through the streets of Rome in this big triumphant parade. Edward's basically we're doing a Roman triumph parade, and you're going to be marched through the streets of London as the spoils of war, basically. It is meant to show we caught the big bad wolf. We caught the she-wolf, the big bad she-wolf, and she is now a prisoner, and look how sad she looks.
It's giving me very Cersei Lannister, having to do the walk of shame sort of thing. Giving me that sort of vibes where everybody's just yelling at you because you're a loser and you lost the battle, and they're treating you like crap.
And the wicked king, the wicked queen that drove her husband to insanity, whose son was a monster and maybe a bastard and went against nature to run an army. Look how defeated she is now.
Yeah. She was brought to the Tower of London, where her husband was also prisoner, although they didn't get to see each other. They hadn't seen each other in like 8 years at that point.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, this is just like another coincidence. It's like every time she arrives somewhere, someone important dies. So when she arrived at the Tower of London, Henry, her husband, ends up dying that night. And the Yorkists would later say that he died of a quote unquote broken heart, when in reality, he almost certainly died of being fucking murdered.
Being fucking murdered is a lot more likely. Yeah. Unfun fact. I say it that way because when I was in Mexico City, we had a tour guide and he kept being like, fun fact, somebody was murdered here. And we were like, I wonder if he knows what fun fact means. But so unfun fact, in the 1900s, like in the early 1900s, they reopened Henry VI's tomb and there was a crack in his skull. So unless the thing that broke his heart also broke his skull, he was probably just murdered. I mean, if you were Edward IV, would you have done it any differently? I tend to think Edward IV was a pretty level-headed guy, and he didn't really go... I feel like in most cases, and I'm sure people could argue, he didn't kill people unless he felt like it has to, like...
He had to. And I mean, we've
Yeah.
talked about this before. It's even when you have a king like Henry who doesn't want to be king, it doesn't matter.
He's a figurehead.
He's the figurehead. So Edward IV eventually knew he was going to have to do something like that. So I'm sure it was in the talks for a while to just kind of try and sweep it under the rug as if, whoopsie daisy, he just died of natural causes. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I can't say that I know that I would do anything different because, like, as long as he's alive, or even, you know, in a generation or so, you know, with the princes in the tower, since they never saw the bodies of the boys in the tower, we had a Perkin Warbeck situation, you know, like, so, and that after Henry died, Edward did, like, show his body to the people of London to be like, and he is dead. Fucking stop it now.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Everybody stop fighting.
Yeah.
Bit of silver lining here. After some negotiations, Margaret was sent to live with the Dowager Duchess of Suffolk and her lady-in-waiting Alice Chaucer, which, if you'll remember, the Duke and Duchess of Suffolk were really, really kind to Margaret when she first came to England. We actually covered them over on Patreon.
Oh, on Patreon. Yeah, we had a whole episode.
When Margaret came over at 15, you know, the Duke kind of stepped in as her father figure. Alice Chaucer kind of showed her the ropes. So this is all total speculation, but we like to think that she was at least happy to be in the company of people she knew, trusted, friends. And I like to think that Alice Chaucer helped her grieve through all of the loss of her husband, the loss of her son, all of these huge changes in her life.
I mean, it's a shitty situation, but it's best case scenario for this shitty situation is the way I read it. But Maggie only got 2 years with her friend who died about 2 years later around the age of 70. And once again, the Yorks were like, what the fuck do we do with her now? Like, how do you solve a problem like the old queen? Like, what the fuck do we do with her?
Yeah, and this could have been a very stressful time for Maggie. Like, what are they going to do with you? Are they going to put me in the tower and make me die of heartbreak?
Right, exactly. But instead, they sent her back to France, which is kind of a relief. France and England came to this agreement. As part of the agreement, France would pay a ransom to get Margaret back. And Edward IV and all of the Yorks could just wipe their hands, like, we are done with the Lancastrians. That part of English history is over. It wasn't, but it is for now, at least, you know.
And Margaret's life back in France is pretty depressing. Yay.
Yeah.
She had no money to pay that ransom. Her cousin Louis actually took possession of what should have been her inheritance from her parents, which big dick move, but are we surprised?
No,
Are we really
no.
surprised?
Her dad was still alive, but he was kind of a dick to her. Dad had recently remarried, and he was like, I am trying to get in my new wife's guts. I don't need my emo fucking loser daughter here. He was tolerant of her, but he wasn't particularly kind to her. And so he gave her a chateau and a very small allowance and was basically, you stay there, do not come here, which sucks, but is better than being in a dungeon or quote unquote dying of a broken heart or living in the streets or,
Yeah. And Margaret lived for about 5 more years like this in relative obscurity before she finally passed away. So on August 25th of 1482, at 53 years old, her last request was that she be buried next to her mother, which was, thank God, honored by the king.
All right. Now, we can all agree that the last part of her life is a textbook bummer. And for a while after her death, her legacy was a fucking bummer too.
She's called unnatural, cunning, demanding, loud, angry. But if she had been a man, oh, you could swap those words right out for brave, strong, has convictions, bold, a strong leader.
Exactly. Shakespeare wrote her like 100 years after her death as like this power-hungry woman who is old, sad, and defeated. He's the one that gave her the nickname the She-Wolf, and it was not meant to be flattering. Hell, she's probably the inspiration for Cersei Lannister from Game of Thrones, the ultimate bad woman. So like even still today, inadvertently, her reputation is not great. I mean, Cersei Lannister is like a big complaint about that I heard a lot about the last episode of Game of Thrones, which was a lot, but people were pissed that Cersei Lannister's death wasn't gruesome enough.
Yeah.
That's what we're working with here.
They wanted her to die a horrible death, and she just died a normal-ish death.
Not in the arms of the man that she loved anyway.
Which was her brother. Oh God. Anyway, hey. I'm getting nauseous. So there is this one article, which we'll put in the show notes, that says that she was a strong queen to a weak king, which totally makes sense. And I think that this is really just the tragedy of Margaret of Anjou. I mean, can you imagine what a powerhouse of history she would have been if if she would have landed 2 or 3 days earlier and Warwick wouldn't have been killed? History would have written about her completely differently.
If she would have been on the winning side, she would be written a lot more like Joan of Arc, I think.
Oh, 100.
Or even her grandmother, Yolande of Aragon, who it was okay for them to be powerful because they're viewed positively in history.
Also, could you imagine if she had been married to a strong man who could have been an actual partner with her instead of this measly little wimp that couldn't make his own decisions?
I wonder if she looked at Edward IV. Obviously, she hated him for usurping her family rights, but I wonder if she also kind of looked at him being like, fuck, why didn't I get a king like that? Why didn't I get a husband like that, that can actually fight in battle? So the book that I read mainly to research this is this book called Red Roses, Blanche of Gaunt to Margaret Beaufort. It's about the women on the Lancastrian side by Amy Lysons. We're going to do a giveaway over on the Instagram and Patreon. So unless you're listening to this not in real time, if you're listening to it in a couple months, sorry, you have missed that. But if you're listening to it at the end of September, early October, make sure you follow us. But I want to read something, a little paragraph from the end of the Margaret of Anjou chapter of this book that I thought was just put it really, really well. Ultimately, Margaret was operating with the limits that circumstance dictated, and she had been dealt a particularly bad hand. While her nationality and gender counted against her, she was not responsible for the dynastic failures that propelled the throne into the York hands. Rather, she did everything in her power to avoid it. So basically it's saying Margaret was given a turd sandwich, but she did everything that she possibly could have done to try to turn it around, and she just didn't. But like you were saying, if things had gone differently, she would be viewed like Eleanor of Aquitaine or something, where it's like, that's a strong woman who did what she had to do, but because she was on the losing side. unnatural bad guy. So I think that's really unfair. And I think justice for Maggie.
Justice for Maggie, and that's the reason why her legacy is still a little bit murky. And it's because we had the War of the Roses, the 100 Years' War in France, and there's just smear campaign after smear campaign that comes after her. But what we do know is she founded Queen's College at Cambridge, which still going strong today.
Love that.
She was fiercely loyal to people that she believed in. She was brave. Oh my God, a brave woman.
So much braver than I would ever be.
Yeah. And gave zero fucks about what anyone thought about her.
I'm here for it. I love her. I don't know that she would have been necessarily fun, but that's not what she was put on Earth to be. She was put on Earth to be a queen, and she fought for it as hard as she could. So, you know what? Our kind of girls. So
raise a glass if you are wrong in all the right ways.
So raise a glass to Maggie, and this was really fun. It was a bummer, but it was fun.
Yes, it was a long journey that ended sadly, but it was a journey that was worth all of the work.
Let's rehab her reputation. So, all right, cheers, bitches.
Cheers.
Bye.
No one hates history, they just haven't found the right teacher yet. Or in this case, a nerdy best friend who loves to tell you all about world history, women's history, and weird history. Hi, I'm TK, the creator of For the Love of History podcast, a place for people who want to learn more but don't know where to start, and history lovers who want to break from the mainstream. From rat trials to warrior women, we cover topics from every country and era. Whether you're a history expert or just starting out, there's a place for you here in the Time Machine. So join me every Friday on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube for a brand new topic. See you there. Bye.